Welcome to the life of a global Desi.
The podcast that connects like minded Desis all over the globe by conforming to stereotypes and breaking them.
Join us both on a journey as we uncover what it means to be a global Desi.
Keep listening.
On to our episode now. Hey guys, this is Archana.
And I'm Aarti.
Welcome to another episode of Life of a Global Desi.
Yay, what are we going to talk about today?
So today we're going to talk about what is it like growing up middle class in India.
Ooh.
I don't know why you said ooh, because I don't know if it's like that great growing up middle class in India, but it is what it
No,
is.
man.
Both Aarti and
I think it's amazing growing up middle class in India. I'll tell you why. Here's
Okay,
why. This is
go for
my
it.
immediate analysis of the situation. The entire global population is becoming more and more middle class, and the majority of the population globally is middle class, including in India, right? We have a pyramid shaped economical structure, and like you have the very rich, and then you have the poor, and then you have the middle class, which is really broad, and there are a lot of people in there, and then so much so that you have like the upper middle class and the lower middle class. I feel like the more people who are middle class, like the more you're middle class, the more people you have to relate to, that you can relate to.
okay.
So I guess it's not that bad.
Yeah, I guess. Like everything else, and that I do research, I also research like what is the exact definition of middle class. So it's basically a French term called bourgeois, right? And funnily,
Bourgeoisie.
bourgeoisie, yeah, bourgeoisie. So it basically means, the social group, which was the working class group, and obviously super prevalent in the industrial era, right, where you had tons of working class people who were in the factories and so on and so forth. But obviously now it includes folks who are professionals, business workers, and their families. So if you belong to that class of people, you're called middle class. And in our case, so Aarti and my case, obviously we also include government servants or public servants in that case. And our dad was in the Indian Army, so we were middle class. And no, not sure what our ancestors I guess were, but we've heard obviously stories that they were part of the trading community, and they used to be super business class people. But the
Depends.
generation,
Different from our
yeah,
dad's side.
and different from our mom's
Oh,
side.
but
That's true.
yeah, but even from dad's side, like it totally depends, because just because you were wealthy like 3 generations ago doesn't mean you're still wealthy,
That's
because
true.
malpractices every
Yeah.
generation.
You know what they say, one
Especially-
generation builds wealth, the next one kind of squanders it away, and then the third one starts building it again. So I guess that's what happened in all
Yeah.
our generations, if you know your ancestral history to back then.
yeah.
But anyway, all that said, our dad was very much middle class because he was in the Indian Army, and his dad, my grandfather, was in the Indian Railways, right, on our dad's side. Yep.
Yeah, so much so that like when dad retired, that's when like the sixth pay commission was just out. So his pension was actually more than his last drawn salary. And right now, of course, public servants have it good. With the ninth pay commission and all that, it's like a whole different ball game right now. But back then, like most of our childhood was like even lower middle class, if you asked me, because like we would actually be living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah, and
like,
obviously, for those of
to
you who
pay
don't
school
know what
fees.
pay commission and those, what Aarti is talking about, sixth pay commission, 11th pay commission, like this is basically market adjustments, right? So with inflation, any salary is adjusted based on what your current market rate is. And so there was a big gap between when our dad got the pay commission. This was back in the 2000s, early 2000s, I guess. And so yeah, like Aarti mentioned, there was a massive jump. The irony of the situation was his last drawn salary was like way lower than what his pension was. What we were trying to say is that both Aarti and I had super, super middle class upbringing, right? For better or for
Very
worse. Very, very
Yeah.
homey and extremely, I would say in a lot of ways, I never felt like
Enriching.
we were lacking for things. There was no there was never like abundance or wastefulness, I guess.
Yeah, there definitely wasn't. The middle class values and the attitudes very much ingrained in us through our upbringing. And I think part of it was also like having an army childhood, like growing up as army brats, because it's not like we grew up with a lot of wealth, but we had a lot of access,
And exposure.
which I feel like is a currency of its own. And, access and exposure, just having that as being army kids, is something that's really valuable and like serves as an incredible currency in today's day and age, in terms of educational opportunities and so on and so forth.
100%. Even just
So yeah,
travel, right? Locally within India. We travel to so
absolutely.
many places that Indians who, if they weren't part of the army,
Would not have heard of
yeah, wouldn't even
even.
have heard of. Coming back to the middle class upbringing in India, this episode is going to be about what is it like growing up middle class in India. So, what is it like? The first thing is there's a general dearth of disposable income. You're definitely living paycheck to paycheck. And again, we're talking about like the 90s, early 2000s. This is just how life was. And so you had to be really creative and resourceful in how you lived and how you used your resources. And of course, we're going to talk about multiple examples. One of the things that I remember a lot is growing up, you pretty much had, in terms of clothes or toys or shoes or books, there was only so much to go around, right? You had one fancy outfit which you would wear to all parties, and you had like your school uniform or maybe a couple of school uniforms which you would obviously wear to school every day. And you had a couple of pairs of shoes. You had a pair of shoes which you used to wear for sport. You had a pair of shoes which was probably to go out if you were having a fancy dinner or a party or something. And then you had like slippers which you would wear at home. I think I can't remember having like too many more shoes
Yes, we
than
did
that.
have chappals, but then
Yeah.
I feel like the middle classness of that entire thing was like there was so much upcycling going on.
100%.
I think something else that sis is totally missing out here in terms of like my experience growing up middle class versus her experience is that I am a second child. So
4 years apart, yeah.
she might actually have like, oh, like one nice dress to wear and like one set of shoes for sports and stuff. I pretty much had.
Hand me downs.
Exactly. Starting with clothes, shoes, and even the bicycle with the two wheels, and then, graduating to the next level. She got a cycle without the, training wheels, and then I got the one with the training wheels. And then she got the Ladybird and her Ladybird, which is a very 90s reference, by the way. It used to be like the cycle for girls, like with a basket in front, and like pink ladybirds were all the rage, whereas guys got to ride like ranger swings. And I feel like that's so sexist, but like for me, I used to love ranger swings. But anyways, I got my sister's ladybird, the pink ladybird, and then her TVS scooty, which she had for school, and then all her books. So now here's another challenge, right? Like we're 4 years apart, and sometimes the curriculum will change. My sister's books used to be often kept for me until I got to that grade, which is like 4 years apart. My homework questions once or twice would be like different from like some other version of the book, which
Anyway,
is
that's too much
cool.
information, but I guess what Aarti's point is that if you're in a middle class family or growing up middle class in India, expect a lot of hand me downs, like 100% hand me down. Clothes, shoes, books, toys. And again, not that
Yeah.
I didn't get any hand me downs, like I had a lot of hand me downs too, because we had a lot of cousins and aunts and uncles, whatever they would wear, like their clothes would come to us. And that's just like a very middle class thing, because you're not growing up in a use and throw mentality. You're not growing up in a culture where it's all about, oh, you have too much disposable income, so you're going to buy whatever you want. You just don't do that. So you're just very
Yes, and
resourceful.
that's a good thing in a lot of ways. Yeah, you're being resourceful. You're also being environmental friendly. Before like wardrobe swaps became all the rage, like we used to do that like naturally.
Yeah.
Not just wardrobe swaps. Like I think this middle class mentality has made us all people from the middle class a lot more frugal, a lot more environmentally cautious. For example, using a plastic bag, like you would use it for its full cycle. It's not, even if it's a one-time use plastic bag, like first of all, plastic is terrible, and like it's high time we ban it. But even if it was like a one-time use plastic bag, we would use it at least 10 times until the end of its cycle, which is being used as a dustbin bin liner. Like that is the end of a plastic bag cycle. Or even say something very middle class that we did back home is drying our clothes out in the sun, which is so environmental friendly because you're not using like the washer dryer ka dryer and consuming more electricity, and using natural sunlight, which is also like anti disinfectant. Like, you know, the sunrise and the UV rays is like, you know, you're being UV disinfected all your clothes, and the sun is hot enough. So I feel like these things are very like sustainable practices in the long run too.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I think I don't know how much of it was the middle class mentality versus just access, right? Say if we had growing up washing machines which had washer dryers, we would use the dryer. But
Are you
um,
sure about that? Because we've been trying to convince our mom to buy a new washing machine just the last time we were there, and she is so insistent on still. We were like, we're gonna get you a fully automatic, and she's like,
yeah, mom,
no, I'm very happy with what I
please
have.
buy a new
Even though the
washing
motor has
machine.
broken like 2 times,
Yeah, this
she's
whole
just like,
concept
no.
of repairing stuff versus just, use and throw.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very middle class
Sustainability.
mentality. Sustainability. That's true. That's true.
I
So
think we realize naturally that we naturally propagate circular economies versus a linear economy where, like, you know, every product has like its inception and its end, whereas we are more circular in our way of thinking about it, where we would want to keep reusing it as much as possible, and that is what makes like a sustainable lifestyle and also a better planet.
we always forget that this was how things always were. People used to use items till the end of their life, till it was pretty much breaking apart, and then you would buy new stuff, right?
Yeah, or
Versus
even
now,
repair it.
yeah, repair
Chappals,
it
getting it
exactly.
stitched, going to a cobbler. Like in India, you'd still find cobblers on the street,
Mm-hmm.
and you would go get your chappals repaired, shoes, chappals, or anything like the sole of the shoe stitched on. It's still a common practice.
Yeah,
Very much middle class.
super middle class in India. The other thing I think I remember growing up middle class was just how you would treat new things in the house. So, for instance, if you bought something new, new equipment, new electronics, a new car, first of all, like getting all of those things was really an event. If you had to buy a new car, it was like you're pretty much putting all your savings and you're buying a new car. I remember growing up, taking a loan wasn't very prevalent. Like credit culture wasn't very prevalent like it is now. Like people never,
Oh,
credit cards weren't a
what
thing.
what was prevalent was even family loans, like taking loans from relatives. It's like a
And
common practice in India.
and literally
Yeah,
having
still.
all the money before you buy something versus paying for it later, like that wasn't a thing. So if you bought a new car or a new television set, you'd literally save up for it for a few years and then you would buy it. So in a way, I think you value that thing more. So I guess like what I was talking about was middle class is when you get a new television set and you have like all these plastic uh, labels stuck on it, you'd keep it on for years after that. Like you'd just be, no one was allowed to like remove those plastic things. So if you go to someone's
Even if
house,
it's blocking like half the
half
view
the
of
screen.
whatever is playing on the screen.
Yeah, and it's basically
Not half, like
it
the
is
top
signaling,
corner.
right? Part of it is just like making sure you preserve that thing, I guess, to its maximum, and then the other thing is signaling. It's like when someone comes to your house, they're like, "Oh, that's brand new." You just because you haven't even like removed the label yet.
Very much in line with Indian middle class mentality of showing off.
Yeah, for sure. And even when you buy a new car, you wouldn't remove the plastic from the seats for like months together until it
Yeah,
it
even if you're
disintegrates
sitting
on
on
its
it.
own.
Yes, and even in the blistering summer when you're sitting on it and you're sweating and you have like sweat
Sticks to
being
your
generated
skin.
because of the sticky, yes,
Yeah.
layer of plastic and your clothes or whatever. Shield thing on top
Yeah, it's
also.
this whole
Like, that has
mentality of
covered.
using something, extending the length of its life, right? The duration of its life. So you don't have to buy another thing for a while to come. The same thing with the TV remote. I remember we used to put like, I have no idea why we used to do this. Again, obviously because you wanted to save the remote from, I have no idea what,
Or
but
having to spend more on a new
on a
one.
new remote, yeah, like a television remote, you would put like two
Yeah.
layers of cellophane transparent plastic on it and tape it up with scotch tape, just so that your fingers wouldn't ruin the print of the buttons, right? It's
Actually,
literally
that's
that.
a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah.
Maybe that's exactly why we did
That's
it.
literally why it
But
is.
also, but also, I don't know how much it served the purpose, because every time you press the button, like your nails or whatever would smudge the two layers of plastic so much that you did not know what was under. But yeah,
Yeah,
like what number were you
I know. I
pressing?
recently haven't seen it at anyone's house, unless, of course, I guess they're from our parents'
I
generation.
guess India is evolving. That's why.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's why though? Like every time I go back to India, I'm just surprised as to how most middle class. First of all, there's so much social upward mobility, right? Like, and you see people having so much more access. Everyone using mobile phones,
Disposable income.
internet,
Tons
apps,
of disposable income.
and having tons of disposable income. Like from 10 years ago, you would certain kind of people whom you would not see in restaurants, like grandparents for example, who would be not very excited about the idea of going out to eat. Now every time we go out to eat, even in some of the fanciest restaurants, you see like full families eating there. And it's become like a thing to go out for the movies more, to go out shopping a lot more, to go out, like the whole consumer culture, I think, is a byproduct of
A
just
growing middle
having more
class.
disposable
Yeah,
income.
having more
And the
disposable
growing middle
income,
class.
credit card
Yes,
culture,
absolutely.
all of this certainly wasn't there when we were growing up in India in the 90s and the early 2000s. And coming back to food, you mentioned that people eat out a lot more in India now. I remember back when we were kids, eating out was like once in a, I don't know, month maybe, once in a couple of months
Yeah,
sort of
special occasions,
occasion. Yeah, it was
birthdays, or
basically
like
just for occasions. Otherwise, you'd literally eat at home whatever your mom cooked, or if you had like a army party, which was actually quite often, but that wasn't really eating out because someone was preparing food at home, or you weren't like ordering in anything because there were no restaurants to order in the remote places that we
there
stayed
was
in
no
India.
like exactly.
And also in terms of food, right? It was such a no-no in the middle class families to waste even a grain of food. It was just understood that your plate of food will be swept clean no matter how stuffed you are, because nothing is going to go to waste. Because someone has
Or
worked very hard to put that food on the table, right?
absolutely, and I think that's still the case. Like
Yeah.
we still do that at our dining table till date. Like no matter how bad it is to overeat, no matter how much more cholesterol you're adding to your already existing charts, it's we still really, dad hates this idea of putting anything away in the fridge. He has to eat everything in one go, basically. And also like fresh food, right? It comes with that as well. And I think saving food reminds me of another thing, which is saving food in like plastic dabbas. Like every
The
middle class
reusable
family, I
plastic
feel like,
dabbas.
yes, it's like until date, even with this whole culture of ordering in, if you order in something, we will still keep the dabba of whatever we ordered in by rewashing it and then reusing it for our own sabjis or our own, everyday
Or if you had
meals.
to give something away to someone else, because you don't want to bother with getting that utensil back, you just use that plastic utensil and you just
So
like
that they
give
can
it away.
just keep it.
Yeah.
And then also you're like, yeah, being selfish about, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, generally growing up, I think food, you definitely didn't waste food. I remember even milk packets. We used to get milk in these, I wouldn't know, there weren't Tetra packs, but there were these plastic packs. And you'd obviously pour the milk out of those packets, but I'd always see moms, and again, like everyone I know did this, they would put little bit more water to rinse out the last drop of milk too, right? And again, we're laughing about this now, but
Yes.
think about how resourceful they were, and think about how
Yeah, absolutely. We
um
still do that, in
yeah.
fact. It's not a
I
thing
mean,
of
I
the
don't, I
past
don't, I
at
don't do
all.
that at all now. But I mean, because we don't
Well,
get.
nothing to be proud about.
No, again, I'm not like. See, that's what I'm saying. It is a generational thing, right? Because how our parents saw, I would say, like lack of resources, not lack of resources, but just not like an abundance of resources, right? There were only so many things to go around. Versus you and I, when we
True.
started growing up and we started working, we didn't really, we got everything pretty easy in a way, right? We started making a lot
Yes.
more money than our parents did and had more disposable income.
I agree with you. Yeah, and now like your statement makes total sense because I feel like our generation, we are a lot more inclined to trade off money for time, like cost of convenience. We prefer convenience over actually going through extra hassle of going an extra step to do something, whether it be, saving some, reusing something, or like saving something. You get the drift,
Yeah,
right?
no, and also I think the concept and the definition of middle class has changed now, because what was middle class, what was considered middle class a couple of decades ago, is different from what middle class is now. I guess there's a larger category of people who are in that middle class now, and so we are technically still middle class, but I guess there's also the behaviors have changed, right? Because the middle class today has more disposable income. So we spoke about people having fully furnished homes very early on in their career versus when we were growing up to buy any single item in the house, like be it a fridge or a television set or an air conditioner. You pretty much had to wait like a couple of years to save up for it. Versus now you literally buy everything on credit and you pay for it for the rest of your life, pretty much, right?
Yeah. Also being like mindful about, even if you buy the air conditioner, like how are you monitoring your electricity bill? That's something middle class too,
Oh, for
right?
sure,
Like we
yeah.
are hacks around like just
Only
saving
using
our
it
electricity, but
for a few
yeah,
hours versus now you have it like on for the
switching on,
rest of your
switching off, which
life.
I don't know,
Yeah.
yeah, how power efficient that is. But yeah, doing things like that. Something that I do want to go back to is like when you were talking about finishing the last grain on your table, like on your plate, that whole attitude, the way it translates to when, like, since I moved abroad or like since I moved to the US or even Colombia, they have really huge portions. So, like, when you order, it's either you're definitely putting on weight trying to finish everything on the plate, or like even if you're getting it parceled, I think it's, we tend to like get it parceled and have a doggy bag because it's like, oh great, two meals out of one. Like you pay for one and you get two meals out of it, which was awesome. But I think that's also such a middle class mentality, like way to think about it, right?
100%. And it might sound like we're making fun of the middle class mentality or just the way you approach food ordering or anything else in life. But in hindsight, it all sounds
True.
funny, and we're obviously joking about it. But I'm extremely grateful for the middle class values that mom and dad
Yes.
instilled in us. At least, I think it's really served me well, because anything that you work really hard for, and then when you feel like you've earned it, you value that a lot more versus when you get everything on a platter, right? And so I guess the whole point is your value system and how you approach resources
True.
and things in general comes from the environment that you grew up in.
Yeah, and not to say that that's, you know, something that everyone abroad does. It completely depends on your
Yeah.
upbringing again. Like middle class is a concept, or bourgeoisie is a concept that's very global. Like middle class people everywhere in all countries that I've visited or stayed at would do the same things.
Yeah,
Like my
that's
Colombian
true.
mom here, like she would have similar hacks that she would use. My American friends, for example, they would be like, I'm gonna totally like take this to go, and you know, I'm sorted for dinner now. And maybe for some reason they do it in a little more classier way. I don't know why, but we are just like very open and blunt about it. We are
About
like
not wasting
much
anything, right? It's just using it
yeah,
to the full potential and making sure that you're getting the most value out of everything that you're using or buying or,
highest
yeah,
return on
absolutely.
investment.
That's literally the middle class
Efficiency, highest return on investment,
upbringing.
like core values. Like if you don't look at this negatively and you actually look at it positively, it's like resourcefulness, jugaad, innovation. It's like ingrained in us. It's jugaad being like a very indigenous term around hacks,
And
right? Like
innovation.
nifty, frugal, yeah, frugal innovations. And I think India is like the birthplace for that. Like quite literally, you see that on the streets. You see that like with in trains, like people just using all these. It's so fascinating. But I feel like there is a flip side to this, which might which might have certain like ethical concerns, right? And
Say more about that.
what I'm trying to okay, so this middle class mentality like would do some questionable things, like which are not completely ethical. For example, say using a Netflix account. Like one person will get the subscription, but like 10 people will be using it with multiple logins all around the globe. Like your cousin in sitting in Singapore will use it, and then suddenly there is a login somewhere else, like in Europe, and like Netflix is like super confused and would write a letter to the owner of the account saying, we see suspicious activity on your account. Like, is this your login? And then people would do that, like 10 people using the same account, because no one just wants to pay like something extra per month
Yeah, it's like 10
to
bucks
actually
extra.
own that
Okay,
subscription.
no, I get it. And Netflix technically does allow you, I think, 3 or 4 devices additionally on on like 10 bucks a month.
Four
Yeah.
devices.
But yes, I think people do
I think we exploit it
exploit it
when we
to
do
the
multiple
maximum for sure.
logins.
And this again goes back to the
Yeah.
mentality of, well, all right, I mean, I guess 4 people are not watching it simultaneously, so why not share it with like 8 people and then just take a chance that
And
8 people are not going to watch it
have you ever
simultaneously.
noticed though? Have you ever noticed though that when you're trying to watch something and someone else on another time zone is also trying to watch something, Netflix gives you a notification. Oh man, I guess I just gave it away by
I'm
saying
sure
this
it
that we are
does.
guilty of
No,
doing
I'm
that
sure
too.
it does.
Netflix gives you a notification saying that your account is being used somewhere else by like too many devices are using this account. You cannot access
For
your,
sure. And
little
so I
icon
guess like
that
part of what we're trying to say is that you find loopholes if you have a middle class mentality and you've grown up middle class because you're trying to figure out you're trying to be just resourceful, right? Like that's the good word for it. The other thing is Costco
yeah,
cards, right? Any
resourceful.
sort of subscription model, Costco cards. I mean, you see so many people at Costco, and it literally feels like you walk in and you may or may not have a membership, but you've tagged along with someone else who has a membership and you're buying like as much as possible.
Costco is like this wholesale retail kind of
Outlets,
store
yeah.
where it's like outlets. It's like super inexpensive, but you need to buy a lot of it to actually get those amazing deals, and you need to have a membership in that. So
It's
you
like an
pay a certain
annual, I
amount for
think,
a
100
year.
bucks or something. Not
Yeah,
sure.
it works great for families and stuff, but like for individuals, like if sis and I were to buy something like a 20 pack of batteries, like I'm never going to use 20 pack in a day, so I'm just going to first of all tag along with a cousin who owns a Costco membership, go to the place, buy that, and then split that between us, which makes super sense, right? It's
Yeah, it
like
makes economical
commonsensical in a
sense.
lot of ways,
And I feel
economical
like
too,
that's
yeah.
how you live your life, right? It's pretty much like you're trying to find hacks everywhere, in every aspect of your
Also,
life.
sharing is caring.
Yes, sure.
Like I think Indian
If you say so.
communities are just like they, no, I'm serious, like in Indian communities just don't have any qualms of asking these embarrassing things, because everyone's on the same page about stuff like this. Everyone is
Yeah.
resourceful, everyone is middle
Actually, that's
class, and we
true. I think
come
it
with
goes
that
back to
mentality.
the fact that what is it like growing up middle class in India, right? Because they know what it is like. Then, I mean, everyone knows what it feels to share multiple like resources among multiple people, right? So people kind of understand what it is. It might be called miserly or being frugal, but I think it's just like being judicious of resources. At the end of the day, I think growing up middle class in India was like I wouldn't have it any other way because I think it's instilled the kind of values in us, at least, I mean, I can definitely speak for myself and I'm sure you do, that it'll stay with me for the rest of my life. Like anything that I do, I'll
Same.
have value for.
No matter how
Yeah, no
rich you
matter how
get, no
much
matter
you
how
how much you
successful
earn, no
you
matter
get.
what you do, you're always thinking about um all right, how can I be responsible? How can I be responsible with money? How can I be responsible with resources? Just because I can afford something or can buy something doesn't mean I'm going to go and like drop like $1,000 or $2,000 on a bag, right? I wouldn't do that.
You sometimes have done that,
Okay, but
but
just because I can doesn't mean I will, because this middle class mentality kind of holds you back in a good way. I'm
I
not
guess.
complaining about it.
I guess that's true. I mean, yeah. I mean, I feel like you are still inclined to doing that, and sometimes you do. But that's okay, which is also good. I feel like the flip side of that is that I think as middle class people, we do not indulge ourselves enough
That's true.
sometimes. Like, sometimes we don't even like give ourselves the kind of self love, self care,
Especially
and
our
like all that
parents.
goodness. Oh man, it's so hard to spoil them. Like, even if
Yeah.
you want to spoil them, they just not feel entitled to,
Trust me,
and which
I've
is good,
tried.
right? Not feeling entitled is amazing, but like sometimes you just want to show love or like pamper someone and make them feel experiences that you want for them. And if they're still being so like humble, it's anyway. So humility is definitely something I'm grateful for. What the whole middle class, growing up middle
Yeah, being
class, has
grounded,
instilled
being
in me.
humble. I think these are values in
Yeah.
addition to the being resourceful. So yeah, I loved growing up middle class. I really loved it. I mean, some aspects of it, obviously, but did I wish I
Yes.
was a billionaire's kid? Yes, but
No, I would not have.
okay.
And not just because I work in the education space or anything like that, but there's so many studies that talk about kids who come from like lower socioeconomic backgrounds have more grit or like more empathetic and so on and so forth. So I honestly believe like the kind of values that get instilled on you is far more valuable than growing up rich. And hello,
I know a
haven't you
lot
seen the
of
documentary
gritty,
Born
no, but
Rich?
I know a lot of gritty rich people, so that's fine. Like gritty and, humble,
All
it's
right.
fine. Like Ratan Tata is super humble, or
Okay.
like we know billionaires who are super humble, like we know Warren Buffett. So I guess like part of it is if you've earned
That's
it
true.
and you've earned it the hard way and you weren't just given everything on a silver platter, I guess, that's the way to go and hopefully. But I'm not going to turn down a next life where I'm born a billionaire. I'm okay with it.
Good for you. I am going to be poor and make my kids like I'm gonna be struggling and I'm gonna make my kids like really deep with values, like fill them deep with
You do
values
you,
and not
Aarti.
spoil
You do
them.
you.
But
More power to you.
I will do me.
Okay, I think we're done on this topic now. See you guys, and yeah, share with us what you have. What are your thoughts on it? If you've grown up middle class in India, share other experiences that you might have had.
Yeah, and if you could relate to some parts of it or like would like to share some cool hacks that we might have missed out over here, please send them our way.
Yes, on social media. All right.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye. Peace out.
Peace out. Stay curious. Keep listening. Bye bye. Hey Desis, if you enjoyed this episode, then please rate, review, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and wherever else you're listening to podcasts.
Yes, and give us 5 stars now, please. Not the chocolate, I meant the rating.
Aarti, terrible joke. Very, very bad.
Come
You're
on.
horrible at PJs.
You are the queen of PJs. What are you saying?
try.
You're telling me?
No one knows what 5 stars is.
Of course they do.
Nothing, nothing, nothing.